Oh, g'day there. Welcome along to the BYC Podcast live from the Export Beer Garden studio. Paul Ford, did you do a fart at the start of that intro?
I moved my mic and I know I felt guilty doing it. It definitely wasn't a fart.
I'm sorry. The look on your face gave that away. Sorry. G Lane in for Jason Hoyt. He's on holiday. God knows what he's up to because he's sending strange messages to social media. But he's not here today. But it's myself. It's great to have Paul Ford, who's beefing away down there in Wellington, and Dylan Cleaver.
Who's not?
You're not beefing away.
Closed studio.
Jeez. Anyway, okay, let's get straight into it. Ashes, third test. Is anyone else's marriage falling apart, or is it just mine?
Yes.
Yeah, yours is?
Yeah.
Paul Ford?
Well, Tracy's quite understanding, but I'm starting to break her, I think. Once we, what have we done? 14 days, I think, of cricket. And I think once we sort of get into those late teen days, I'm going to be in deep trouble. Yeah, for sure.
I find it quite difficult because it's not New Zealand. That's what
justifying it.
My wife really struggles with the fact that why do you care so much about England and Australia, and I can't explain it. And also, there's been a few testy moments. I've spent a lot of time on the couch in the lounge. Obviously, you guys are similar. But one night, the wife went out on a night out, went to a play, and I was like, you know what, this is awesome. She'll be out till like the early hours. So as a guilty pleasure, I got my phone out and I got into bed and got into jammies, and I got like about 3 or 4 pillows out, and I lay the phone up, and I was going to watch the Ashes in bed. 10 o'clock, she comes home, walks into the bedroom. It's like, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, God damn it, man. This is my one guilty pleasure is I can watch the Ashes in bed, and she sends me back down to the lounge. I'm like, God's sake.
So inconsiderate.
I do tend to do the middle session in bed.
Yeah, you obviously got a way more tolerant wife. How do you get away with that?
I make a little hut. So I'm like got the sheet over my head so that it doesn't get too bright, and then get the phone out. The wireless is pretty good in the bedroom, and then I pop back up for the final session.
Well, yeah, you let us know how you watch the Ashes and how you get away with it. Slide into the DMs.
I go deep into I do the first session and then sort of prepare the sort of breakfast and stuff for the morning so I can get up and be straight into the coffees and all of that.
Oh, yeah.
And then I record it, and then I sort of skip through the moments, but I don't know what's happened. And that's from 6 till 7:15. I have 75 minutes to get through 4 hours. So, yeah, it's quite an elaborate procedure.
Trust you, Paul Ford, to be way more organised and structural about how you consume your Ashes. God damn you. But anyway, let's get into it. The third test, England back into it. Australia got sucked into England's game plan.
Yeah, they did. What a series. It's just incredible. That's how I justify it to my wife, is that I can't possibly be missing this. It's 3 tests that both of them could have gone either way on the last day. This one, England were chasing 2-5-1 to win. They should have done it quite easily, I think, and then they were quite unlucky. Their 2 best players, Stokes and Root, went out to really soft leg side strangles.
Yeah.
But my word, did they make up for that bad luck later in that innings where Chris Woakes seemed to spoon every second ball he faced into the air and somehow miraculously control it by joystick to have it dropping between fielders. It was, just another amazing chapter in this series, which was so overhyped, but has somehow managed to live up to it.
Paul Ford?
Yeah, and look, it was another agonising run chase. And I guess the observations, just at a sort of a overall atmosphere level, I thought the crowd was fantastic, and actually both teams and the crowd were reasonably dignified. I think it could have got quite septic, and we could have seen quite a lot of what Dylan sort of talked about last week, all that sort of attempted mancads and players sort of having to kind of overcompensate and kind of being a bit theatrical and a bit dramatic. We saw a little tiny bit of that, but generally I thought both teams were quite dignified, and obviously Stokes and Cummins were integral to that, and both had pretty magnificent games, to be honest. It's just great cricket to watch. 47 sixes. Stokes has got 14 of them. And England, I think you summed it up nicely, Michael, quite surprisingly, but quite neatly to say that they did suck Australia into their game plan, and it did feel like this was a slightly brainier baseball that got played when they needed to slow things down. And make sure that they sort of faced a few less overs, or maybe just sort of knock the spinner around rather than try and pump him 50 rows back from ball 1. They did that. And I think Australia just kind of fell into the trap a little bit of wanting to impose themselves on the game, and it worked brilliantly. And this time it felt a little bit like Australia was intoxicated by their own magnificence rather than the other way around.
Yeah, I think because obviously England have to win the next 2 games to win the Ashes. So they've got to move the test on as quick as possible because either way they want a result. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, and the first day, 13 wickets fell, and it was like, okay, England have totally sucked in Australia here. Like, not sucked them in, but this is falling perfectly into England's hands because, barring rain, it's not going to go the full 5 days when you lose 13 wickets in the first day. So it's whether Australia in these next 2 tests, you got Old Trafford coming up, and then they go to
the
Oval
yeah.
After that. It's whether Australia try and change their game plan. I don't know, where they try and shut up shop and where they play for a draw, which is going to be even more fascinating because if they start playing negatively, then does that change the dynamics? And I don't know. I suppose that lends itself to have England got momentum, or were they just lucky?
Good cricket wicket too. So you can't.
Yeah.
Conditions are going to play a part in this. Clearly, I think Stokes was unhappy with the first 2 pitches, very slow.
Yeah.
And so there was far more pace in that wicket. Old Trafford tends to turn. No Gary Lyon.
Yeah.
Which makes it a little bit more difficult.
He's out for the entire rest of the Ashes?
Rest of the Ashes. It's not like England are overflowing with spin options themselves.
Yeah.
But possibly that will play into England's hands again. Look, it's just set up really well now, and I can actually see England pinching the Old Trafford test if they get a bit of weather. Manchester generally has just terrible weather.
Oh yeah, awful. But I mean,
and if there's going to be a rain-affected draw, it'll be this one. But I can see them pinching this and it being all on for the Oval.
Paul Ford, your experience of Old Trafford goes quite deep. What's your thoughts?
I've got a lot of quite traumatic memories, actually. I remember that was where the Welsh guy got beaten up in the toilets for daring to not sing the English national anthem and to join the New Zealand national anthem, I rember. And he got absolutely dealt to in the toilets. Yeah, you and I nearly got dealt to, not in the toilets, but literally in the middle of a pub when we knocked over a jug of beer across the pool table at the pub very close to Old Trafford. And it happened to be the night that Ricky Hatton was fighting, and so everyone was feeling a little bit jumpy and a little bit punchy. So we dug ourselves out of quite a difficult situation there. And then, of course, we talked about this last week, but Daniel Flynn's dental rearrangements as well. Those were sort of my 3 abiding memories, all violent from Manchester.
Oh, and also Dan Vettori managed to run himself out, classic running through the wicket with his legs in the air. Remember that?
He did a Bracewell.
He did a Bracewell before Bracewell. And Ross Taylor's magnificent 150. He swept slog every delivery into the stands for 6.
New Zealand losing the unlosable test.
Yes.
And also during that week, which I actually also happened to be at, to my great fortune, Manchester United won the Champions League.
Oh, so Man City went
in a penalty shootout against Chelsea. And so the whole town, and as Paul mentioned, there was Ricky Hatton. So the whole town was like brimming and on edge. And
I also completely underestimated the rivalry back then. Anyway, this was what would this been 15 years ago?
Oh,
maybe. I can remember. I underestimated the tension between Man City and Man United. I kind of underestimated that rivalry a little bit, and I think
I think we really came up the curve quite quickly on the War of the Roses by getting ourselves into some quite difficult situations between the Yorkshiremen and the Lancastrians.
Yeah, we didn't know what we were so naive. So naive. I actually remember also getting in a taxi and asking to be taken back to my accommodation, and the taxi driver drove 10 metres and then ticked me out again. He was playing a joke, but I was dangerously lost in Manchester. I had no idea where my comm was, and
you read on Canal Street.
Yeah, and he just drove me 10 metres and said, "Get out." And I was like, and he goes, "You think you're funny?" And I was like, in a Manchurian, I was like, "No." And it's like, "You're here." I was like, I was 10 metres away from my accommodation. Anyway, so ins and outs from this last test. Ins for you, Dylan Cleaver?
So the ins and outs were Moeen Ali came in for Ollie Pope and Chris Wokes came in for James Anderson. You'd have to say it was successful on both fronts, even if Moeen Ali's move up to number 3 didn't really work. He got the cheap wickets of Labuschagne and Steve Smith, which is always brilliant.
Yeah.
And Todd Murphy came in for Nathan Lyon. You have to say that Pat Cummins didn't show him a hell of a lot of faith in that run chase, 2 overs. And maybe a little bit too much faith in the first innings when Ben Stokes was going absolutely nuts. Mitchell Marshall was in for Cameron Green, played superbly, absolutely brilliantly. And Scott Boland came in for Josh Hazlewood. Scott Boland did not take a wicket, did not score a run, and when Mark Wood skied the ball in that fourth innings run chase, did not make any effort to run in and catch it, and instead poor old Alex Carey had to run back from keeper and ended up spilling it. So not his finest.
I thought it was a nice touch from Boland. It sort of showed what he thought about the Johnny Bairstow incident. And he thought that Kerry was a bit of a dick as well, and was quite happy to shame him out in front of the entire crowd by letting him drop that catch just to even things up. So I thought that was very decent of Scott Boland.
So are you saying that potentially is Hazelwood back in? Because how are they going to get in Mitchell Marsh and Cameron Green in this next test? What goes on there? It was Cameron Green out again.
Oh, that's a very good point. I guess we'll get to it now. That's the David Warner question.
Well, yeah, Warner has had a shocker. Oh, how good is that? We've just released a great video on the ACC social of the 17 dismissals of David Warner to the bowling of Stuart Broad. It's such good watching. It's cricket porn for people who hate Davey Dum Dum like myself. I've watched it twice. It's very similar shots he gets out to.
Well, he's just in terrible form, isn't he? And, I mean, he had a decent first test, was it? Or the Lord's test, he played pretty well. But his average this year is 18.41. Last year he averaged 30, and that included a double ton in that. So his form is just dropping like a stone. 17 times Broad's got him out. That puts third on the all-time list. I think Atherton McGrath at 19 is the top, and Alec Bedser to Arthur Morris at 18 is second. But now Broad's joined a list of third equal with 17. If you drop him, you either pick Marcus Harris as a like-for-like opener, or you do something really funky and say to a Cam Greener and a Mitchell Marshall,
you're opening.
Yeah, Bazball it.
Yeah, I don't think Australia.
Do you know what? They're so wedded to the idea that Cam Green is their future that I think they might consider it.
Really?
Yeah.
I think they will. This is my thoughts anyway. Before Paul can weigh in on it, I think they'll stick to the missionary. I don't think they'll change anything in this next team because I believe they think they should have won that test, and they will carry on as per. They won't throw any Cameron Greens at first. I don't reckon. I reckon Warner's safe for at least this test match.
I agree with that, Mike. I think what's his name? George the selector. He's a conservative guy. George Bailey, and I can imagine that they, as you say, there's multiple options, but there's also no need to panic. They've won 3 tests in a row. They're Sparrowfart from kind of being up 3-0 and having the Ashes locked away. They can make one simple change. I think they'll bring Hazelwood in for Boland. That seems like a no-brainer.
Yeah.
And then I think Warner stays. I think they'll bench Green. I think they'll say they'll say, his injury's not quite 100%, and they'll stick with Marsh and just make that one change and just leave everything as is. What I really do hope, of course, is that Warner absolutely sucks again. Broad gets him out twice. They go to the top of the bowlers dismissal list, and they look back and go, oh shit, I wish we hadn't picked him. I really do hope that they do that. And I loved seeing the Australian coach go, look, I don't want to talk about David Warner. I mean, that is wishful thinking. What is there, 9 days between the test match? Yeah, good luck with that. Because he's been involved in 3 50-run partnerships with Usman Khawaja. It's like, yeah, okay. Yeah, sweet. No, good point. We'll leave him alone then. That seems very reasonable.
On the topic of Marsh, not a bad test for him, was it? Not a bad between innings for him?
4 years, wasn't it? 20 test matches, run a ball century, and he looked magnificent. He was dropped reasonably early, not by Bairstow this time, I think. I think it might have been Root that dropped him and made them pay. Jeepers, he looks good when he stands up tall and flays it through the covers. But it was just nice because he seems like a decent Australian, and his brother seems like a decent Australian. We're pretty sure his old man was a decent Australian. And in fact, his brother and his old man were in Bali celebrating. And a video of them went viral celebrating Mitchell Marsh's century. And this is what Mitchell Marsh had to say after it.
I saw it just as I walked in, yeah. Sean's 40th in a couple of days' time, so all the family's in Bali. So let's hope he gets to 40.
How Australian is it to go have your 40th in Bali with your parents and get absolutely shit-faced and watch your brother score a test 100?
Yeah.
It was wild. The video footage was just literally Jeff Marsh in the background just screaming and dropping F-bombs. It was just so good. You effing beauty! You effing beauty! Yeah, it was a sensational knock, and I felt like he was going to take the game away from England. A run a ball century. He looked like he looked like the only batsman really, for that first couple of days that had worked that pitch out, and then he just started middling. I mean, there was a pull shot off Mark Wood that he hit so perfectly in that first innings. It was great, and the backstory around him, he is a good bugger, and they talk about him a lot as being a great team man. And he was talking about when I think it was in that same press conference that clip was just from, but he said how, it felt pretty good to be out there after 4 years. I've just, love being on tour with the boys and all that kind of stuff. And just sort of said, it's great to get an opportunity. Most of Australia hate me, he said. And this goes back to, I think it was 2018 when he came in to the Australian team for Pete Hampskin, who's a St Kilda boy, so from Melbourne. And when they threw him the ball on the first day, the Melbourne crowd booed him like massively. He had tears in his eyes, he said that day. He obviously didn't sort of show it.
We'll see.
Everybody was just like, man, that's pretty psychotic from the crowd. But I think a lot of people probably ended up on his side after that, and how he's bounced back after 4 years. No, I don't think anyone would deny him that ton. It was a real Baz ball knock too.
You mentioned Mark Wood there, slogging Mark Wood, but how good was Mark Wood? How terrifying was he in that first innings? Chucking it down over 150 kilometres hour consistently and accurately as well. I mean, to me, it looks like he's going to break in half at any moment. Like either the classic express fast bowler that he throws everything through the crease, that it looks like he's about to either face plant or snap in half.
Well, he spends half his follow-through on the ground.
Yeah.
Like every second ball, he's on the turf. That was the fastest recorded spell in England, that first spell of that test that he bowled. I mean, obviously that's a relatively new stat. They weren't doing it when Larwood was playing or John Snow or anything like that, but still, it's pretty damn impressive. He beat himself and then Brett Lee, then himself. So he's bowling thunderbolt. I love the instruction that he was given, apparently. He talked to Ben Stokes, and Stokes said to him, don't worry about the runs, just bowl rockets.
That sounds familiar. It sounds familiar, doesn't it, Paul Ford? It sounds like when Baz had control of Adam Milne and a few others.
It sounds like what someone would say to you at like under 11s as well in club cricket. Like it's just so basic. I love that. And, he's been a guy that's been injured. He's had a hip injury, which is obviously pretty niggly when you're trying to bowl 155 kilometres an hour. And, even as recent as a couple of months back, he said, I don't think I'll be playing any of the Ashes games. So a pretty remarkable comeback, 7 wickets, absolutely wrecking the tail. And the players, I mean, I've got no experience of this whatsoever, but the players do talk about 140 being, okay to face. 145, you start to think about it. And then 150 is like, no one enjoys facing 150. And it was interesting seeing him and his blood pouring out of his elbows after he'd fallen to the floor a few times, and really hurrying up Khawaja, who's just looked like he's had so much time, over these last few matches over in England. And I can't help but think, how good would it have been to see Mark Wood at one end and Jofra Archer at the other? Man, that would have been wonderful. And then, of course, he comes out and, people have said it was the turning point in the test match. I'm not sure about that, but shit, he did bat well, and whomping 5 sixes, it did feel like... I don't know, something, it triggered something for England.
It might have been the turning point, because up until then, Stokes had looked like he wasn't quite sure how to go about it, whether he should nurse the tail and hit out himself, or whether, they should just try and eke out every run they could. He really looked like two minds. Then Mark Wood came out and started dispatching it into the crowd, and Stokes thought, hey,
that's my job.
I like the look of that.
What did he? I think he ended up with 40 off 16 balls in the test match. So, not bad.
Waiting. From the sublime to the ridiculous, how tits for hands Bairstow.
Yes.
How sustainable is he as a test wicketkeeper? He's a great bloke. I enjoyed how he manhandled that pitch invader and just biffed him over the sideline. Love that. I love the fact he's just a fiery ginger. Love the way he bats, but is he a keeper, though, that's worth keeping? No pun intended.
I think the injuries had probably more of an effect on his keeping than they'd like to admit.
Yeah.
But Baz can be quite stubborn about things like that, and he's set his stall out, hasn't he, and said, he's our keeper. He's brilliant. And even in the first test when he kept poorly, McCullum thought, I actually thought he kept pretty well. And like it was pretty obvious to everyone that he hadn't.
Yeah.
But it's so costly. And when you got, I think the fact that his mobility is a bit down has had an effect on Joe Root at first slip as well. He doesn't look that confident, and he's a great slipper. So it's been super costly. I reckon you could argue it cost them that second test. It nearly cost them this third test. Would bringing folks in hurt the side? I don't see how it would, but at the same time, just like you reckon that they're not going to ditch Warner, I reckon they're not going to ditch. England aren't going to ditch this plan.
Yeah, you're right.
No, they're not. And yeah, you're right. Bairstow and Root's catching's been shit house. And I saw a piece of nerdery that Wisden had put together, and they went through every single catch. And Root's dropped 6, Bairstow's dropped 5 and missed a stumping. And Ben Stokes has interestingly been dropped 6 times as well by the Aussies.
Jesus.
And they reckon that collectively those drops have cost England 400 runs. And Australia's drops have cost 250. So, collectively, perhaps another thing that you could turn to. But yeah, it does seem like the fielding or the catching, is that pressure? Is that because the sort of backdrops are so busy? I don't know. Or are the players just not practicing enough? I don't know what it is, but it does seem like the catching's been disturbingly crap.
Well, if you believe the punishers that do the pre-game, Kevin Peterson, I can't stand him. Anyway, Kevin Peterson, that guy, and they talked about the wobbling ball once it goes past the wickets in England, the wobbling ball from the Duke's ball. Yeah, but I don't buy that too much. I mean, if you're keeping and you're dropping a wobbly ball, surely Bairstow's used to it by now. He's been playing with Dukes for 20 years.
I did hear Tom Blundell say that keeping at Lords was the trickiest thing he's done. I'm pretty sure it was Tom Blundell. He said, the amount of movement after the nick's been taken and after the ball's gone past the stumps is crazy compared to other grounds. He didn't say that about England in general, but yeah, I mean, England are consistently towards the bottom of the slip catching league. Yeah. So maybe it does have some effect, but I mean, it's still pretty inexcusable, some of these drops. They're not like they're super hard.
Yeah. Okay. Well, last bit of wide on about the Ashes before we move on, and that is Harry Brook joining the great Colin de Gronholm, the minute piece in the 60 Camel, Tim Southey, on the fastest to 1,000 test runs on balls faced. So he's gone to, was he gone to number 1? Fastest to 1,000 runs, balls faced. Now
it's a pub rule. It's a pub record.
I do love the balls faced because it's like, I mean, Tim Southey, he's faced not many balls because he either hits it for 6 or gets bowled. Yeah. So that's why he's got there the fastest. I love this. This is a stat we need more of, Paul Ford.
I can't believe. I honestly did not know that Tim Southey had that record, and I did not know that the minute piece was second. Like, it does feel like one of those things. I mean, maybe we knew it at the time. I'm not sure. I just feel like it's passed me by. Yeah, it's not so obscure as to be embarrassing. It's quite a good record, but it's a great pub record because it sort of doesn't make any sense. I bet no one in the world in any quiz, apart from New Zealanders, would have got this question correct for the last 10 years.
Yep, I agree. Rightio. That's the Ashes done. So next Wednesday is the next one. Old Trafford, Manchester. Get your marriage in order. Get your partners. Get your flat in order. God, I wish I was flatting during this Ashes series and just set up a grandstand and just all go for it, as opposed to the minefield that I'm navigating currently. But next up we have fish and chips from Whitby. Paul Ford.
Do you want me to have a dabble at this? Lovely to hear from Tony Blaine during the week. Yep. Fish and chips from Whitby. So I guess certainly T-Bone's pretty keen to give us his view on the Ashes. So here we go. The Ashes has risen from the ashes with England's fraught win at Headingley at the weekend. They got lucky with the weather, the overcast conditions on Saturday evening allowing them back in the game, and with Lyon missing, the Aussies lost their way defending what was a very gettable target on what was effectively a third-day wicket. Had England not managed the win, then the series would have been a damp squib, with the likelihood of all the old negativity being turned back onto Stokes, McCullum and co. And while the win has brought them a reprieve from the Bazball backbiting for now, there are some serious selection questions to be asked before the next test. For starters, what to do about Bairstow? His difficulties behind the stumps have seemed to affect his batting. Let's face it, above all else, cricket is a confidence game, and Johnny seems to currently be in crisis. If Folkes comes in, who's left out? And Harry Brook at 3 doesn't have a happy ring to it, in my humble opinion. Then there's the Anderson conundrum. Who and when decides that it's time for the great man to hang him up? I suspect he'll play on his home patch next test, but if he doesn't pose more of a threat than tests 1 and 2, I might suggest it's hasta la vista, baby, maybe. But at least the series is still alive, which is more than most of us were thinking after Lords. Anyway, lads, onwards and upwards. Go the mighty All Blacks. Cheers and beers, and good luck to your families. Blaney.
Lovely to hear from him. I was a bit worried, actually. We hadn't heard from Blaney for a while. But he's terrible with keeping email addresses.
Does he shift email addresses, does he?
No, he forgets.
He forgets them and then starts a new one.
Yeah, and it doesn't come up in his automatic thing. So he would have been writing to my old New Zealand Herald email address, probably wondering why it hasn't been.
He would have been cursing you. He would have had a little Dylan Cleaver doll. He would have.
Does he run an analog address book where he just sort of remembers off the top of his head what someone's email address is?
Yep.
I can imagine a voodoo doll of you that Tony Blaine would have. Its mouth would be stuffed full of marbles, and he'd be a little stabbing it. You answer me, you marble mouth mofo, as he sticks it in and out. Right. What else? What other news we got going on? Any other New Zealand cricket news, Dylan Cleaver?
We've got quite a bit of New Zealand cricket news, actually. I guess top of the pops is Gary Stead.
Oh, yeah, steady the ship.
Back for another 2 years. The word around the traps is there was this thinking that there might need to be a little bit of a change, but not Stead, maybe some of his staff. And to that end, I think the long-standing bowling coach, Jurgensen, is off to coach Wellington, so there'll be a replacement there. But, yeah, he's through to the end of the next test cycle, and I think the press release said arguably New Zealand's most successful coach, and it is fairly hard to argue against it, given they've made finals and won the World Test Championship.
Are we, Paul Ford, the only team in the world that has a coach for all formats? Only top-tier team?
Ooh, that's quite a good question.
I can't think of any other team that has one coach across. I'm talking top-tier. I mean, I'm talking Holland and Sri Lanka.
Do they run a multiple coach? No,
what do Australia do?
Australia have different teams because I think Vittoria was involved in the T20 setup exclusively, and then he got pulled into the Test setup. I don't know about head coaches. The head coaches might be different, but it's a question. Maybe someone can answer that for us out there in the BYC
Well, it was
community.
talked about in the release.
Oh, was?
They said they did discuss having a split coaches for different formats, but with New Zealand having a small player pool and so many of the players playing across all formats, it made sense to have a single voice.
And quite a small checkbook too, Dylan. I would imagine that's probably a factor when you think about the potential guys that we might like to come and take, say, our T20 team, Stephen Fleming. He's not going to get out of bed for. I'm not suggesting that he's sort of money hungry about it, but it would become a difficult equation. And at the end of the day, there's only so much money to go around. The thing I did just want to mention, though, the interesting thing about Stead, I was just reflecting on that appointment, and I've got no qualms with it. But it does feel like we're entering into a period of international cricket where the coaches' relationships with the players are going to be critically important in order to get the best players playing at the most important times. And I do wonder whether that the good relationships that Stead has formed with some of those big dog players is going to be pretty useful over the next few years.
Yeah, absolutely. You talking Trent Bolt there, by any chance, Paul Ford?
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe. Good to see Trent Bolt back in the nets at the Bay Oval. He was temporarily banned from Bay Oval nets because he wasn't contracted and was expected to pay his own way. But he is back in the Bay Oval nets bowling, which is great to see as a casual contractor that he is now for New Zealand cricket.
Do they lock the doors? What sort of system are they running there? Is there a security guard there, or is it sort of the lights don't turn on unless you have a key or something?
I think you just turn up with Kane Williamson and the door's open and the lights are on. Okay. I think that's the general rule.
Good to see Kane back with the bat in his hand.
Yes,
too.
Yeah, getting some heat from his daughter in the kitchen. She likes the short stuff, doesn't she? Like it was when he took her front toe off. But that was good to see. But White Ferns in action as well over in Sri Lanka. Paul Ford, you've caught up with any of that action?
Well, is it action? I'm not sure if you'd call it that. But look, I think they did finally sort of turn the corner in a couple of those games. And I know what Dylan will be looking out for. Someone other than someone that's not called Bates, Kerr or Devine doing something spectacular over there. Well, I don't think we've seen that yet. Bates and Kerr got us home in the first T20. Kerr got the wickets. To be fair, Lee Casbrick and Eden Carson did get a couple each. And then in the second one, it was all Bates and all Kerr. So, and then Leah Tahuhu, who I think is not contracted with 4 for 21, was really the sort of, she dealt the killer blow in that one. So you were clean.
She's been returned to the list.
Oh, she's been returned.
Yes. So that ended up being a short spell off the list. She is back in the central contract. She never should have lost her contract, I think.
Madness.
It was madness. And it's also really interesting to see Lee Kasperick back and bowling well. How they could afford to ditch the person that's been their best spinner for years when New Zealand cricket is not in, or female cricket is not in a great spot, is baffling, to say the least. So, yeah, it actually looks like they have decided that, hey, let's pick our best players and see how that tactic goes for a while.
It's not a bad tactic.
Quite a proven tactic, actually.
Speaking of that, speaking of winning teams, the Cricket World Cup qualifier tournament that seemed like it was going on for goddamn ever is finally finished. Sri Lanka have taken it out. So they qualify, and so do the Netherlands, and I take it the West Indies are gone burger.
West Indies, Ireland are the two full member nations who will not be at the World Cup.
Right. So Netherlands are probably probably the winner out of this.
Netherlands did amazingly because they didn't even have access to their best players over there. So they did really well. Scotland were bloody unlucky. Scotland could have lost that last game and still qualified, but they lost by just enough to miss out to the Netherlands. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think it seems that there's a lot of cricket being played in that tournament for two teams to play a final. Both of them go through. I think the top four teams from that should qualify and just go straight through. I'd be happy to have 12 teams in that comp. The irony of the Netherlands as well is, so they come out, they got flogged in the final, which didn't matter because they're going anyway. They probably went out and got steamed. What do Dutch people drink when they go out and get wasted? Anyway,
Heineken.
Whatever. Yeah, that. And then the coach came out and said, "Oh yeah, we're disappointed to have lost that game yesterday, but what we'd really like is a sponsor, and we have no fixtures scheduled for the next 3 months. So if anyone wants a game, call me." And basically read his mobile number out at the press conference. It just shows how funky this World Cricket situation is. The teams that I think qualify for that World Cup get $1 million too, so it's absolutely crucial. If you get in or don't get in, that you use that money wisely. But the whole thing feels a bit sort of like a bit of a shambles. And, starting from the point that you have to play a qualifying tournament in Zimbabwe of all places, Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Do the West Indies care about one-day cricket or Test cricket, for that matter? Is it just T20 for them and that's it?
I think so.
Yeah, it's starting to look that way, isn't it?
Yeah, right. Because they're hosting next year's T20 World Cup. They're hosting it with the States, with Miami. Next year, the 2024, is that right? The T20 next year?
That sounds right.
Yep, that does look right. And also the Major League Cricket is starting in the States too, which obviously will be...
Oh, yeah, I saw the first game sold out. I saw a post from the Whakamana Express, who's living his best life over there in Texas, via New York to Texas, playing for his team. That looks like a great league to be involved in.
Oh, my God. It looks sensational. And Dylan, I know you've been worried sick about Finn Allen not being in county cricket, but the great news from your point of view is that he's knocking about with the San Francisco Unicorns.
Of course he is.
With Corey Anderson.
Oh, is he back?
But he does have to also hang out with Marcus Stoinis and Matthew Wade. So you look, it's not a free ride. So Conway and Santner at the Texas Super Kings. I just want to say the team names because I just think it's important.
Rattle them off.
Adam Milne, Glenn Phillips are at the Washington Freedom. Lovely Trenty's at the Mumbai Indians, New York. And, of course, Lockie and Guppy at the LA Knight Riders. So, they're going to be having an absolute hell of a time. That tournament goes for 17 days.
Yeah.
It's short and sweet.
Most of them played in Texas, is that right? And then moved somewhere else. I think there's only 2 locations they play in.
I think it's both in Texas, isn't it?
Right, that was it. All of it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Both venues, I think, are in Texas, and I might be wrong there, but it's they're not moving far.
All right, and you touched on county cricket, New Zealanders in England. Have you got a question for us, Dylan?
I have.
You've got a question for the audience?
I have got a question for the audience. A very handsome New Zealander scored an unbeaten ton overnight, meaning he has scored 4 centuries for 4 first-class teams in the past 3 years. If you can name the man and the teams he has scored centuries for, you'll go in the draw to win one of Jason Hoyt's used vaping cartridges.
He's on the... that prize that's false advertising because he's on the analog vapes.
Oh, is he?
He's on proper durries, so we'll have to send you some cigarette butts.
Some butts, yeah. And if you don't want that, we'll just call your name out on next week's BYC.
And where do you send that answer to? Do you slide into the DMs or you Paul Ford Where do you send those answers to?
Flick us an email to byc@beigbrigade.co.nz or slide into the DMs on the gram or the Facebook for the Alternative Commentary Collective or the Beige Brigade.
Waiting.
Sweet. And so there's quite a few Kiwis over. Is there any Kiwis in New Zealand?
Like Finn Allen.
Finn Allen, no, he's over in the States. Is there any contracted cricketers in New Zealand right now apart from, steady the ship? Because they all seem to be playing the Blast or county cricket.
Does anyone know where Tim is? Tim Southey?
Oh, yeah. I saw him on Sky the other day.
Yeah. Actually, it's been quite a productive Vitality Blast, which is the English T20 domestic competition, not to be confused with the 100, which is coming up. But son of a Mitch had a brilliant blast for Lancashire. He's scored his runs at 160 strike rate, scored 435. Mitchell Santner was he also got 12 wickets. Mitchell Santner also got 12 wickets for Worcestershire and was one of their top scorers with 404 runs. He was fantastic. Munro, remember him?
Oh, yeah. Is he still around?
He's still around for Notts. He scored 300-plus runs and that. Did all right. Matt Henry was effective for Somerset, 24 wickets, one of the top wicket takers in the competition, fourth to top, I believe. De Grandhomme didn't have a great tournament, and Bracewell was going all right until he damaged himself quite badly. But I noticed there's a couple of random ones. Cam Fletcher played 3 games in the Blast for Glamorgan. Matt Quinn, who is one of the forgotten men in New Zealand cricket, playing for Kent, and Ish Sodhi played 3 games for Somerset. And we've also got guys playing in the county championship. I won't go through all the stats for that, but Henry Shipley, Ajaz Patel. Now, there's a funny stat with Ajaz Patel. He's taken 10 county championship wickets. He took them all in one match.
He loves a blitz. He loves a 10-foot.
Yeah, he is yet to take a wicket bowling on Durham's home ground. Henry Shipley and Will Williams, who's no longer available for New Zealand, Quinn, no longer available for New Zealand, and Will Young has just got a few games over there.
How does that work, DC? Like, do they sort of take a break to let these Vitality Blast games happen, or do you end up playing a bit of county champs and a bit of T20, kind of like they used to do over here, a couple of years ago?
So I think there's still the semis and the final to go with the Vitality Blast, and they have been mixing and matching between first class cricket and the T20, because there was a criticism, much like New Zealand actually, that the county cricket had just been pushed to the margins of the season really early in the season, where the pitches were terrible and the weather was freezing, and then right at the end of the season when people were already well into football. So they've made more of an effort to sprinkle the first class cricket throughout the season, and so players, if they get called up for England, are actually prepared. They've been playing red ball cricket, but the 100 is still to come.
Sweet. I think that's around the traps. Do we have a news for Ruse from you, Paul Stewart Ford? Not this week. Not this week. We only do news or Ruse when the New Zealand team's playing. It's quite an arbitrary rule, but that's sort of how we're doing it. So back again next week, I believe. No, or is that only when New Zealand are playing? Yeah. Okay. Alrighty. Yeah. Well, until September. I was looking forward to tanking Jason Hoyt's results. It always gives me great pleasure to tank Jason Hoyt. He's a man. We'll tell him that he lost news or Ruse. We'll tell him that. Yeah, I think that's important. You do that. Any cricket violence corner? No. Have you done anything this week, Paul Stewart Ford? No. We're just doing Ashes specials. Ashes specials. It's just Ashes specials. No furniture. No furniture whatsoever. It's just Ashes. I did wonder why it was very. But they're longer than the normal podcast, so I'm not sure that we've really achieved the brief. But anyway, shit, there was a lot of Ashes in there. That's why my wife hates me, because I just talk. Everyone's far too obsessed with the Ashes. But okay, we'll tune in next week for probably be a preview, won't it? For the third test kicking off at Old Trafford, and any other news that's coming out of the cricket world. Surely there's some violence going on somewhere, Paul Ford. You can. All right, I'll bring some. We'll unleash some violence. It's my favourite segment of the show, to be honest. And if I was listening to this as a listener, and Cricket Violence Corner with the screaming Matt Heath and that intro didn't come out, I'd be heavily disappointed. All right. Feedback noted. Yeah, and also if you want any questions or anything to the BYC at beigebrigade.co.nz. This podcast by far is the most podcast that really receives the most amount of mail and emails from the fans. So thanks very much. You guys are all massive cricket nerds.
Give us a 5-star review, although, Mike, you clearly wouldn't have given us a 5-star review for this particular show, but generally speaking, go in and give us a 5-star review. It all helps.
Yeah, it does help you. It helps with the algorithm. On the Agenda podcast, the Daily Agenda, we ask for a 5-star review and slag us off when we give a prize. So it's 5 stars, would never listen again. But it doesn't matter about the comment. It just matters about the star. So there you go. So go on there, share with your mates as well, and we'll be back next week.